It was the day Indonesian badminton fans were dreading. It gave us the answer to a question that had been plaguing the badminton community for months. The Minions, one of the most dominant and exciting men's doubles pairs ever, a pair who changed the ways men's doubles was played, would never reunite. Now, for some of you, this may raise some questions. Like, why are they called the Minions? Aren't they just the lovable yellow characters from the movie Despicable Me? And you might have others, like just how dominant were they? How exactly did they change men's doubles? Well, if you have those questions, then you're in luck, because I'm going to lay it all out for you. The good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly. Oh, and don't worry, I will tell you just how they got that name. This is the story of the Minions, the pair who changed men's doubles. To start this story, we are going to go back to October of 2013 in Paris, France. And the reason for that is this was the catalyst for how the Minions would inevitably be formed. At the time, Marcus Fernaldi Gideon was an independent player, having just left the national centre earlier in the year, and had established a new partnership with the late great Marcus Gideon, a former world and Olympic champion, a player with a vast amount of success and experience. And at the French Open that year, in what was only their 5th tournament together, they came through the qualifying, defeating seeds and established pairs en route to winning the title.
They've done it! Would you believe it?
This was a spectacular result. A Super Series title was one of the highest a player could have achieved in the regular season at the time, but I don't bring it up just because of that. I bring it up because it was at this French Open that the wider badminton audience got their first glimpse at Marcus Fernaldi Gideon, and everyone watching was impressed.
And Fernaldi, for me, was outstanding.
It would have been so easy for Gideon to have been overshadowed by a player of Gideon's level, but Gideon wasn't. In fact, he was able to shine in his own right, showing to everyone that he could belong at the top of the world in men's doubles. Something which Marcus will continue to show in spades as this story unfolds. But back to 2013, clearly this ability to shine and belong with the world's best was something the Indonesian coaches noticed too, as over the next year they kept a keen eye on Gideon. In 2014 he built on this, reaching the latter stages of numerous tournaments, including an impressive run at the All England, reaching the semi-finals, and winning a second title, this time on home soil, at the Indonesian Masters, a final in which we are introduced to the other player central to this story, Kevin Sanjaya Sukamuljo. Like Marcus, 2014 had been a rather good year for Kevin. Following an OK junior career, he joined the national centre and was partnered with Sylvanus Gay. As a partnership, they tasted very early success, winning their first tournament in Vietnam. They followed that a month later by winning a Grand Prix title in New Zealand. And on top of this, they were already starting to play and perform well at the higher level of tournaments, culminating in that Indonesian Masters final against Gideon and Gideon. Following the end of the 2014 season, Gideon was invited back to PBSI by head coach Chafiz Youssef, an invitation Gideon didn't turn down, even if it meant he was unsure of who he was going to partner, but fate would soon produce one. At the same time as Gideon was invited back, Sylvanus Gay had to resign from the national team due to injury, leaving Kevin Sanjaya Sukamuljo without a partner. With both players having shown great results and promise in 2014, Chafiz Youssef made the decision to put the two together, and thus the Minions were born, although at the time they hadn't been given that nickname yet.
Last year, win loss record, because as I was saying, this is the very first tournament that they've ever played together.
Whatever made coach Chafiz decide to put Kevin and Marcus together, he must have been thinking he struck gold, because in their very first tournament together, they managed to reach the quarterfinals. And this was quite a significant quarterfinal, and as it wasn't just at any old tournament, it was at the biggest and most prestigious of them all, the All England. In that quarterfinal, they may have lost out to the more experienced Danish pair of Mads Pelle Kolding and Mads Conrad Petersen, but Kevin and Marcus showed to everyone watching that they were a pair to look out for. On such a big stage, with zero experience together, they delivered a very good quarterfinal performance. On top of this, they showed some of the skills that they would become known for in the years to come. The crazy skills and outrageous shot choice from Kevin, the unrelenting attack and energy from Gideon, and you could just tell that the level of speed these two could play at could be something never quite seen before. Ever. They continued this fine form and displayed even more of those skills in their next tournament in Switzerland, where they reached the semi-final, and they only just lost out on a spot in the final, throwing away leads in both the first and second games. In just their first two tournaments, these two Indonesian youngsters had flown out of the blocks, and had already shown to everyone that they had huge potential. Even Jill Clark could see they could become something special.
I think this young Indonesian pair will be a force to be reckoned with in the future.
It wasn't just Jill Clark though, as following this tournament, this post was made to badmintoncentral.com. And looking through the comments, there were a lot of people in agreement. Inevitably, there were some who felt otherwise, but the vast majority were impressed with their speed and potential and touted them to become Indonesia's next top men's doubles pair. Following those two great early results, Kevin and Marcus continued to improve, and in July of that year they reached their first ever final at the Chinese Taipei Grand Prix Gold event. They lost that final to the pair that would go on to win the Olympics the following year, and two players who separately had already tasted Olympic success, Fu Haifeng and Zhang Nan, in quite convincing fashion. But the final result didn't overly matter. A huge takeaway was that they had reached their first final. And maybe more importantly, in the semi-finals they had scored a huge win over none other than Mohamed Hassan and Hendra Setiawan, a pair who just 1 month later would go on to win their second World Championship title. This was far and away the biggest win of their partnership so far, their first win over a pair of this level, and it only further cemented their potential for the future. And this potential only continued to be realised more and more as 2015 progressed, as they started to regularly get close to more and more top pairs, and then just 3 months after their first final, they won their first tournament. 2015 was clearly a great year for Kevin and Marcus. They had reached the quarters of the All England, reached their first final, won their first tournament, and had also defeated both pairs who contested the World Championship final that year. The question now was, what would 2016 have in store for them?
And they've done it for Gideon, Marcus Fernaldi and Kevin Sanjaya Sukamuljo. A first Grand Prix gold title together.
2016 started even better than 2015, as in their very first tournaments, the Malaysia Masters, they won. But that was just the beginning, because that Malaysia Masters was a Grand Prix gold event. In the Super Series era, there were 4 main tiers to the BWF tournaments. It did go lower, but I'll focus on the main 4, the top 4. They were Grand Prix, Grand Prix Gold, Super Series and Super Series Premier. Just over a year into their partnership, Kevin and Marcus had won titles at the bottom 2 levels, Grand Prix and Grand Prix Gold. Could they make the next jump up?
It's gone long, and indeed the unseeded combination. A first ever Super Series title for them as a pair.
Within just 3 months of winning their first Grand Prix Gold, they had now won their first Super Series, the India Open. If that wasn't impressive enough, aside from the early rounds, they had won this tournament in devastating fashion. This pair were climbing the men's doubles ranks faster than anyone could have imagined, finding themselves just outside the top 10. When they backed that India Open title up with their second Super Series title at the Australian Open, well then there were real talks that they could be the future of men's doubles, a future world #1 pair. But surely this could be a little bit soon. I mean, they had been playing together less than 2 years, and whilst they had had some great results, 2 Super Series titles is certainly impressive, and they were both still so young, with so many amazing pairs, established pairs on the scene at the time, you'd have reason to doubt that they are a surefire future world #1 pair. Well, if those doubts existed, then they were about to be answered very soon.
And this time they convert. A third Super Series title of the year for Gideon, Marcus Fernaldi and Kevin Sanjaya Sukamuljo.
What makes this title even more special and significant is that the China Open is one of the biggest tournaments of them all. It was a Super Series premiere. Outside of the majors like the World Championships, Olympics, etc., a Super Series premiere is as big as it gets in badminton. Kevin and Marcus, in less than 2 years, had now won at every single level of the BRF Tour. They had a Grand Prix title, a Grand Prix Gold title, a Super Series title, and now a Super Series Premier title. And if that wasn't enough, Kevin and Marcus finished 2016 ranked as world number 2. That prediction about them being the future world number 1s was looking less like a matter of if, but more of a matter of when. But even with that in mind, no one could have predicted what 2017 would hold for Kevin and Marcus. To put it mildly, 2017 was the year of the Minions, and I mean that in more ways than one. Firstly, well, the obvious, they won, and they won a lot.
And indeed, it is a 5th Super Series title. It's missed 6 out of 6. This time, they convert. Service fault called. They retain their title. And they've done it. History has been made. But Gideon and Sukamuljo have now broken the record. A 7th Super Series title of the year.
By the end of the year, they had reached 9 finals and won 7 titles, amongst those being huge titles such as the All England, another China Open, and the Super Series finals. It should come as no surprise then that they also became the world number 1s, a ranking they would go on to hold for quite some time. And if all of that wasn't enough, by the time 2017 ended, the Minions had completely redefined men's doubles. They ushered in an era of lightning speed.
Oi, great save.
Oh, my goodness! Well, that's unbelievable! Brilliant.
Indonesian men's doubles players have always been fast, always been skillful, and have always been amazing in the first 4 shots of a rally. It's a big reason why they are the most successful men's doubles nation in history, but Kevin and Marcus took all of that and put it into hyperdrive. Especially Kevin, who was quickly establishing himself as the most exciting player to watch in all of badminton.
Oh my goodness, there we go again. Well, perfect example of what I've been talking about with his anticipation. No wonder he's probably the most exciting player in the world to watch in men's doubles.
Kevin even had a serve named after him, the K-serve, which in essence was a serve that would tumble and spin. A serve which quickly garnered popularity, with other players racing to copy it, and YouTubers racing to put out a tutorial on how to do it. Never before had a serve like this been done, legally I may add, yet if you look at current men's doubles players, it has become somewhat the standard. But if all of that wasn't enough, on top of these titles, number 1 rank, redefining men's doubles, and revolutionising aspects of the game, I call 2017 the year of the Minions because it was during 2017 that they got that nickname. Well, actually the origin of the Minions nickname came from 2 years previous, but it was popularised and used even by the BRF in 2017. Let me explain. If you go to Google and search "why are Kevin and Marcus called the Minions," you get this result. Gideon and Sukamuljo are often referred to as the Minions because of their below average height and for their fast and agile playing style, jumping and bouncing just like the Minions in the film Despicable Me. But that isn't quite true. It doesn't give you the full story. The Minions nickname actually originated from a fan, Stephanie Zen. Stephanie would regularly tweet about Indonesian badminton, and whenever mentioning Kevin and Marcus would use the hashtag Minions, something she did from the moment the Minions first became a partnership in 2015. Now this moniker of the Minions did confuse Kevin and Marcus, saying in one interview, "We don't even wear yellow." But Stephanie gave her reasoning in this tweet from 2015, which when translated says this: "In my honest opinion, experience is superior to Hendra Asan. But Kevin Gideon wins in variations of punches and stamina, chasing the ball here and there, really like a minion." But how did tweets like this from 2015 gain so much global attention and popularity by 2017? Well, I have a theory that is built upon two things. Firstly, in 2017 the Minions became the dominant force I've already shown you. They were much globally known in 2017 as opposed to 2015, so tweets about them garnered more attention. Thus, Stephani's tweets, which were already popular, became even more so. The Minions' name was already set in the minds of badminton fans. And secondly, well, it's easier to show you.
We're in 7 finals, but it didn't win one of them. Is it to be history today? It's history anyway.
Yes, at the Japan Open they walked out wearing a full yellow kit. If their height and stature was what started all of this, wearing the colour yellow cemented it. The Minions' nickname was forever theirs. 2017, it was the year Kevin and Marcus not only exerted their dominance over the men's doubles discipline, but their nickname, the Minions, was cemented forevermore. But 2017 wasn't all good, as an ominous early sign of things to come did show itself, meddling at the majors. When it came to winning or doing well at the top echelon of tournaments, namely the Super Series Premier events, the Minions rarely failed. In fact, in 2017 they reached at least a final in all but one of the 5 Super Series Premier events. As a result, when the World Championships rolled around in Glasgow, Scotland, I think most expected them to at least medal, with a large number of those expecting them to win. But surprisingly, they were defeated in the quarter-finals by Hong Wei and Chai Biao of China.
Defence standing up, but not enough! Chai Biao with a forehand into Gideon's body. The Chinese have done it.
Now, maybe it was the enormity of the tournament. Maybe it was the pressure on their shoulders, the expectation that they should at least medal, that caused this loss. To me though, this result wasn't all down to just pressure on the Indonesian shoulders. It was also down to the fact the Chinese had figured out a tactic that could possibly counter that incredible speed of the Minions, playing with height. This was a tactic which, just like the Minions failing to medal at these World Championships, will play more of a role later on. Right now though, as 2017 ended, regardless of those World Championships, the Minions were in full swing, and as 2018 started, and with it a new era in badminton, the World Tour era, the Minions were about to take their dominance to the next level.
A record is broken, their own record, because they have now won 8 World Tour titles in a calendar year. Last year they won. Done it.
2018 started incredibly strong for the Minions, winning 4 of their first 5 tournaments, including defending their All England title, becoming the first Indonesian pair to do so since the legendary Ricky and Rexy in the mid-90s. With this even better start to 2018, the Minions entered that year's World Championships in Nanjing, China in an even stronger position. They had the men's doubles discipline in a stranglehold, and if the consensus had been strong that the World Championships was theirs to lose last year, well then in 2018 that consensus was even stronger. And all was going well. They weren't flawless, but they won their opening 2 matches and once again found themselves in the quarterfinals, where they were to face Japan's Takeshi Kimura and Keigo Sonoda. This was by no means an easy match. The Japanese had managed to defeat them a few times previous, but even so, with the playing styles and form going into these worlds, the Minions were seen as the favourites. But, just like the year before, once again they failed to deliver, losing in straight games.
There it is, both on the floor, in delight.
And just like the year before, they were defeated by a pair who was able to withstand their attack and make the game purely physical. No better demonstrated than the 117-shot marathon rally in the second game.
117 shots, look at that.
2 World Championships in a row now, where the Minions had failed to even medal. This naturally led to questions being asked. Were the Minions going to be that pair that win all there is to win on the World Tour, but who will always fall short at the majors, such as the World Championships? This was not exactly something they'd like to be associated with when you consider the sporting world was already gearing towards an Olympics, And maybe even more pressing than that, an Asian Games. An Asian Games that was just around the corner. An Asian Games that was on home soil. Heading into those 2018 Asian Games, of course the Minions were still seen as favourites. Yes, the failure at the two previous World Championships had cast some doubt, but there was something huge in their favour. The fact these Asian Games were to be held at home, more specifically the Istora Senayan. Twice already the Minions had played in that venue and both times they had won. Could they make it 3 from 3 and in the process silence some doubt over their major medal winning ability? The Minions were far from perfect at those Asian Games, but that didn't matter. They had won gold. A gold medal which, regardless of how the remainder of their career would pan out, would cement them in Indonesian badminton history. The Minions, though, were far from done with 2018. They played 7 more tournaments, winning 4 more titles, and continued to show to everyone that they were pretty much unstoppable. 2018 came to a close, and all in all it had been nothing short of an amazing year. They had reached a staggering 10 finals, winning 9 of them. Yes, they had failed to medal again at a World Championships, but that was quickly forgotten as they had won Asian Games gold. As we moved into 2019, it seemed the Minions Express was showing no signs of slowing down. They quickly won the first 2 tournaments of the year and moved into the next tournament, the All England, full of confidence. The Minions were looking to create history at those All England Championships, aiming to win a 3rd consecutive men's doubles title, a feat which hadn't been achieved since the 1970s. A feat, however, that they wouldn't be able to achieve, as surprisingly they lost in the very first round. Well, maybe surprising is a little harsh. Yes, no one expected to see the Minions lose first round at the tournament they had made their own the past 2 years, but the pair they lost to were the 2017 World Champions. But still, a first round loss certainly sent a shockwave around the badminton community, and for the Minions, this wasn't the end of the shocks. At the next tournament in Malaysia, they lost to their compatriots Fajar Alfian and Mohammad Rian Ardianto in the quarterfinals. And then at the Singapore Open, they lost in the semi-final. Now, a semi-final doesn't sound like a bad result, but when you consider this was the 3rd consecutive tournament where the Minions had failed to reach a final, something that hadn't happened since 2016, well, there were some people thinking that maybe the Minions bubble had burst, with the other men's doubles pairs having caught up and knowing how to counter their crazy fast style. If that was just a theory then, following the next tournament, the Asia Championships, it pretty much became a reality. At those Asia Championships, Kevin and Marcus won silver, so they reached the final, back where they belong. Right? Well, it wasn't the result that showed to badminton fans that maybe the Minions had been figured out. No, it was the scoreline, as Yuta Watanabe and Hiroyuki Endo beat the Minions 21-18, 21-3. 21-3. That is a score that is unheard of, even in the early rounds, let alone a final, and let alone against the Minions, a pair who up until very recently had looked almost invincible. Now remember how I said earlier how the high defensive tactic was seemingly the way forward against the Minions, and how it would play a role later on in the story? Well, we are kind of at the start of that chapter here, as Endo and Watanabe were the pair to fully expose this. For the remainder of 2019, Endo and Watanabe beat the Minions 3 more times, at the Thailand Open, the Hong Kong Open, and finally at the World Tour Finals. Now, it must be said that following that little blip of tournaments that followed the All England, the Minions were still the world #1s and did get their season back on track. In fact, they ended 2019 with 9 finals and 8 titles, a statistic that most pairs would have given their right arm for. But whilst this was still an insanely impressive year, it most certainly wasn't all good. They suffered yet another early World Championship loss, this time in the first round. They lost in the first round of the All England, they had their worst run of tournaments since 2016, and they had seemingly found a pair they couldn't beat, a pair who had given all the other pairs in the world a blueprint to defeat them. Heading into 2020, an Olympic year, the Minions were still #1s, but big question marks were starting to form. 2020, as we all know now, was a weird year. The COVID pandemic sent the world into a spin, and countries all around the world went into lockdown. Badminton completely shut down. But just mere days before it did, BWF ran one more tournament, and it was a big one.
Is playing host to the Yonex All England Championships.
At this All England, the Minions were back in fine form. As each round moved forward, they seemed to get better and better. Playing like this, they were still the clear world number ones, winning matches and entertaining everyone in attendance simultaneously. I think most saw them as not just favourites to reclaim their All England crown, but also any small doubts over their level that were there before this tournament started seemed to be squashed slightly. That was, however, until final Sunday, as in that All England final they were to face familiar opponents, Yuta Watanabe and Hiroyuki Endo. With the Minions in the kind of form they had been in all week, most felt the only pair who could stop them would be Endo and Watanabe. This dynamic created a great buzz around the badminton world, with everyone eager and excited to see what kind of match they could produce. And the final was, well, ridiculous.
Ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. How is this possible?
In what was considered, and still is considered to be, the greatest men's doubles final in All England history, both these pairs put on a real spectacle. It was the attack and creativity of the Minions versus the rock-solid defence of Endo and Watanabe. But just like their previous encounters, it was yet again the Japanese pair who came out on top. The Minions had now lost 5 consecutive times to the same pair, something that just a year before would have seemed impossible. But in an interview later in 2020, Marcus Gideon brushed this off, saying, "This seemed to be a very weird situation, but it's okay. It's part of the competition. Other pairs also lost to us consecutively. That's why it makes the sport more fun and challenging." A very positive way to look at the situation, but this interview also highlighted something else, the immense pressure on this pair to always win. They mentioned how even reaching a final is seen as a failure, unless they win, and that they are expected to bring home at least 5 titles per year in the top tier of tournaments, something which not many players or pairs are ever capable of doing. And if that wasn't enough, failing their ability to medal at the 2019 World Championships, the only goal given to them for the Tokyo Olympics was gold, nothing else. But as we all know now, those Tokyo Olympics were to be postponed, and unfortunately for the Minions, this wasn't the best thing for them. Following those 2020 All England Championships, the badminton world completely shut down. It did briefly come back in October with the Denmark Open, but the vast majority of Asian nations opted to skip this event, with Indonesia being one of them. The badminton world was not set to really open up until 2021, where 3 back-to-back tournaments were to be held in Bangkok, Thailand. Pretty much all badminton nations were sending players to these events, and that of course included Indonesia. But sadly for Kevin and Marcus, they wouldn't be making the trip. Kevin had contracted coronavirus on the 20th of December, and by the time the Indonesian team were to depart, he had failed 2 subsequent COVID tests. This was quite a knock for both players, as with the Olympics being rescheduled for later that year, and with the number of tournaments between January and those Olympics being uncertain, this was a key chance missed to get some valuable tournament play for the Minions. Sadly for the Minions though, this wasn't the only bad piece of luck to hit them that year. In March, at the All England Championships, the entire Indonesian team were forced to withdraw from the tournament. This was due to the fact there had been a positive COVID case coming from the flight they had taken to the championships, and with a British law at the time meaning anyone in close proximity must quarantine for 2 weeks, well then the whole Indonesian team was affected. It was an ugly situation, not helped by allegations of how the BWF handled the whole situation. Now, I don't know the details, and it really isn't necessary to dig into them for this story, but the crux of it is that once again Kevin and Marcus missed out on an opportunity to play some much needed matches and gain some confidence before the Tokyo Olympics. Something they definitely could have done with when the draw for the Olympics was made. Dubbed the Group of Death, Kevin and Marcus found themselves in the same group as India's powerhouses Ranki Reddy and Shetty, Li Yang and Wang Chi Lin, the pair who won all 3 Thailand tournaments, and Britain's Sean Vendy and Ben Lane, who, although were the weaker link in the group, had proven just that year they could challenge and beat a number of the world's best. With the lack of match play heading into these games, coupled with their 3 previous World Championship performances, there was uncertainty surrounding the Minions. But even though they lost to Li Yang and Wang Chi Lin, they were still able to top the group and get themselves into the quarterfinals. In those quarterfinals they were to face Malaysian pair Aaron Cha and So Yik, which to many was seen as a dream draw. Even Malaysian newspaper The Star deemed it a mountain to climb and the worst possible draw in the knockout stage for Aaron and So. This wasn't because the Minions were the world number ones, it was because Aaron Cha and So Yik had never beaten the Minions before. It seemed to everyone looking on that the Minions already had 1 foot in the medal rounds. But then... Just as had happened at the World Championships in 2017 and 2018, Kevin and Marcus fell in the round before the medals. Once again, the quarters was a hurdle they just couldn't get past. What could the explanation be? Was it simply a matter of too much pressure to win that gold? That expected gold? Was it the lack of tournament play in the build-up? Was it their opponents simply having to match their lives? Or was it possibly the speed of the shuttles? That last point might seem a little left field, so I'm going to make a little detour here to explain it. Around 2021, there was a general feeling that the speed of shuttles used at international tournaments was getting slower. On their podcast, The Badminton Experience, Anders Antonsen and Hans Christian Vittinghus would often mention this, with one particular moment standing out above the rest.
Few years in general, the shuttles has been extremely slow. I remember when we played on Bali. When was that? Was that 1.5 years ago almost now, or a little bit more than a year?
It was 1.5. It was November, December. 21.
And out there the shuttles were extremely slow, and I also remember hearing rumors that they did not have enough of another speed. That was why we played with that one. But I don't know if that's true.
Now, that reference to the Bali tournaments came at the end of 2021, but the concern of shuttle speed was something that had been mentioned long before, and is something that would be mentioned in multiple future episodes. Why this affects the minions is rather straightforward. If you recall, the tactic that was most effective against them was a defensive one, utilising lots of height. With slower shuttles, this would only make it much easier to implement that tactic, and as a result would nullify the minion's strongest game of using fast, quick attacks and flat play. That quick side note aside, going back to those string of questions I asked, I believe it was a little bit of everything. But there was something else, something that came to light in the period following the Olympics. Head men's doubles coach Harry IP went on record saying that Kevin had been suffering a shoulder and knee injury in the lead up to the Tokyo Games, injuries which got worse after the Olympics. It was something actually that had probably plagued him for a while, as even at the All England in 2020 his right shoulder was taped rather heavily. However, there was no time to rest, as the BWF was keen to get back to full-on badminton, with a run of tournaments that was absolutely brutal. At those tournaments, Kevin and Marcus did do well. They were a part of the Thomas Cup winning team, they were runners-up at the French Open, they won the Hilo Open, and in the Bali bubble they reached 3 consecutive finals, winning the Indonesia Open. On the surface, this looks like a pretty decent run of tournaments, especially after the heartache of the Olympics and bad luck at the start of the year. At the least, you would think this run of tournaments would be a positive. Well, not exactly, as when watching the minions in this period you definitely get a sense that something isn't quite right. They looked flat and their motivation seemed to hang on a knife's edge. There were some fiery displays from them one week, only for that to turn to indifference the next. Sometimes this even happened in the same match. Things weren't looking great, but maybe it was just fatigue. Maybe it was the post-Olympic blues, something which most top athletes face following such a major competition. And maybe it was just those injuries, not quite fully healed, just getting to Kevin. But even so, I can remember having this nagging feeling that maybe they needed a change, something fresh, that or some extended time away. And I wasn't the only one, as around this time a user by the name of Grouchy Clown Posse made a post to the r/badminton subreddit about the minions, airing similar concerns and posing a huge question. His post read as the following. They're my absolute favourite pairing in the sport, but the pair seem to have lost the fizz, fire and sparkle that characterised their partnership at the start. And say what you will, they haven't won enough to justify the partnership carrying on, despite spending nearly 175 weeks at the top. What are your opinions on who can replace Gideon? Do you think a former singles player can be adapted to the role, given their better baseline play? Sukamuljo is abysmal from the back of court. Now, this post didn't garner a lot of attention, but it did receive some responses. Some believing something needed to change, and some people even commenting who they think Kevin's new partner could be. It was a mixed bunch, but the overarching feeling was that Kevin needed the new partner. It wasn't so much they both needed a change, possibly angling at the fact that maybe Gideon should retire and allow Kevin a younger partner. Funny when you consider one person's suggestion was Mohammed Hassan, a player 4 years Gideon's senior. But I digress. 2022 came and the Minions were still a partnership, although by the end of this year, any feelings that these two should split definitely got stronger. At the All England they reached the semi-finals but were defeated by their younger compatriots, Fikri and Maulana. This was a surprise result. However, at those All England Championships they did play some decent badminton, especially in the quarterfinals where they showed a very good level.
That'll do it. It's a big win from where they were, especially in that first...
And maybe more than that, they showed desire to win again. But this was temporary, as from here 2022 went quickly downhill. At the Indonesian Masters they also lost in the semi-finals, ending an undefeated streak at the Istora Senayan that had started in 2018 and had spanned 6 tournaments. Their next tournament was once again back in the Istora Senayan, at the Indonesia Open. If they could make amends here, then everyone would overlook the Indonesia Master result. Well, that didn't happen, as they lost incredibly tamely in the second round, putting in a performance that was the root cause of some drama. But we'll get to that shortly. At the World Championships they once again failed to medal. In fact, they weren't even close, losing incredibly easy to England's Lane and Vendy 21-15, 21-9. This was such a shock that even the BBC posted a rare badminton article on their website. Japan Open, another second round loss, this time to 2 semi-retired players. They did reach the final of the Denmark Open, but then they followed this with a first round exit the next week in France. And that was it. That was their 2022, the worst year of their career as a partnership. They lost their Istora Senayan streak, they had another underwhelming World Championship run, they didn't win a title, and they put in some very underwhelming performances, all of which led them to lose their world number 1 ranking, a ranking they had held for 214 consecutive weeks. Now, another factor I haven't mentioned is that in 2022, Marcus Fernaldi Gideon had to undergo surgery to remove ankle spurs, and so as a result they did miss a lot of tournaments. This can also go some ways to explaining the underwhelming performances, but it was during one of those that caused the drama I alluded to just a minute ago. It all happened following Kevin and Marcus's second round loss to Kam Min Hyuk and Sanjaya. Coach Harry IP had not given the pair any specific target because Marcus was still trying to recover his fitness following surgery. Marcus said as much in an interview, saying, "We've only been training for a week or 2. But if that wasn't bad enough, Kevin not only made a lot of unforced errors himself, but also, according to one article, his body gestures show that he was not playing completely." Now, this was translated from Indonesian, so I believe what they really meant to say at the end was, playing to his fullest. And this was something that head coach Harry IP took issue with, stating, "He wants more, wants to win. So yesterday's conditions didn't match his wishes. His body language was bad. Indeed, as a top-level player, he should have responded to all of this well." He then went on to say, "We have given him input regarding his attitude. His attitude should reflect that of a champion. Winning and losing must be handled gracefully." And then he finished with, "The public can judge Kevin's body language. That's why we have given him input. Regarding public criticism of Kevin and Gideon, we can accept it. This is also input for Kevin to be better in the future." Now, to me, this all sounds like rather sound advice from a coach with years of experience. Some could say Harry didn't need to say this publicly, but for me anyway, I don't see anything inherently wrong with these lines of statements from Harry. But Kevin saw it differently. With his frustrations building, a few months later, Kevin suddenly decided that he would no longer train under Coach Harry, with the main reasoning being pointed towards those criticisms from earlier in the year. As it transpired though, it went a little deeper than that. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details, but it seems that Kevin had always felt that Harry IP had neglected both him and Marcus. Which is interesting, because if you go to Marcus Fernaldi Gideon's Wikipedia page, look what it says was the reason for him initially leaving the National Centre in 2013. Interesting. But anyway, this whole thing was eventually resolved, mediated by the Indonesian national governing body, PBSI, and all was well, apparently. No, I am sure that both Harry and Kevin were able to look past this and move on. I feel Kevin reacted this way because of frustration with where he was at performance-wise, looking back at some missed opportunities, and just got angry, wanting a change. And as 2023 rolled around, change was yet again something on the minds of a lot of badminton fans, and change is what they ultimately got. Second round, quarter-final, second round, semi-final, second round. Those are the results the Minions achieved in 2023. A list of results that, had you told me just 3 years before belonged to the Minions, I'd have thought you were crazy. But sadly this was the reality, and as a fan of this pair it was hard to watch. What made it hard wasn't that they were losing early, or that they were playing at a much slower pace. It was hard because you could see that their heart just wasn't in it. That energy they used to bring, that passion, that creativity, all of it had been dulled. Especially Kevin, who looked disinterested in so many of their matches. And if I'm honest, this disinterest was present in 2022. It's what kick-started that drama with head coach Harry, and what's also clear is that it started after Marcus's heel injury. Kevin's visible frustrations were all too obvious, and you could tell this played on Marcus, who was trying everything he could, but with his recovery being difficult, combined with his natural slowing of age, then the Minions were a shadow of their former selves. It was quite sad to see. Watching back some of their matches from 2023 is heartbreaking, and none were more so than the match that ultimately became their last, the second round at the Singapore Open. In that match against Takura Hoki and Yuga Kobayashi of Japan, Marcus was not having his best match, making a lot of unforced errors. These were not through lack of trying, but regardless, the effect it had on Kevin was all too visible. In the second game, he hardly tried, best summed up by the match point.
Hoki and Kobayashi have run away with the second, and Kevin, without putting up a fight on the final point.
And that, everyone, was the last point the Minions ever played together. Quite sad when you consider the career they had had. It ended on Kevin giving up on a serve, an ace from a flick serve. Truly not the ending they deserved. But that's exactly what it was, as following this tournament it was announced that Kevin and Marcus would split ways and play with new partners. However, this ultimately didn't last long. Kevin played a couple of tournaments with Ramat Hidiat with little success, but then it was announced that Ramat would partner Jeremiah Eric Yoke Jakub Rambatan, leaving Kevin without a partner, and to this day there has been no news of a new one for him. And Marcus also only played 2 tournaments with Mohamed Ryan Nur Fadilla before announcing his retirement on his 33rd birthday, and with it ending any last hope that possibly the Minions would reunite and come back to the World Tour, ultimately closing the chapter on one of men's doubles' most exciting and revolutionary pairs.
Done it! What a way to finish the kill.
The Minions. They were a pair that electrified badminton fans all around the world. They were a pair that set records, a pair that dominated their discipline for 3 years, and they were a pair that without doubt changed the entire men's doubles landscape. They are a pair that have clearly influenced some of today's top pairs. And even 10 years or more from now, their influence will still be present, their style and approach will still be felt on court. They are, of course, not infallible. Their inability to medal at the Worlds or Olympics is a blemish on their career, and for their detractors will be something held over their heads. And their on-court demeanour, specifically Kevin, did leave them unfavourable with a few of their opponents and a number of fans, labelling him cocky. But regardless, to me, as to many others, the Minions are a pair that left an impact on the world of badminton. The way it all ended was sad to see, although on reflection over the past couple of years the signs have been there. But hey, rather than dwell on how it ended or the numerous what ifs, I think we should celebrate and ultimately finish this video on what they did achieve, which in its own right is amazing. The Minions, they may not have been at the top of the game for long, but like they say, the brightest star won't shine forever. In fact, the brightest star lives the shortest amount of time.